Okay, so we're going to have to make a start now. So, good afternoon, everybody who's joined the this webinar. And just to be clear, this is for the Clinical Scientific Computing Specialism of the STP program. If you're here, maybe looking for medical physics or clinical engineering, well, please stay because you might decide this is a better option, and we'll get some good candidates. So I'm just going to do a very, very quick run through on what we're going to be doing this afternoon. So yeah, here's my bit. I'm just going to do a very, very quick introduction, housekeeping. Then I'm going to hand over to Stuart, who's a former trainee, who will go through some of the work-based curriculum. Then we'll be joined by Paul Ganny, who will cover some of the academic content. We'll then hear from some past students. Helen, Elise, and Naomi, all of who have found employment after completing the scheme. And then we'll be going through. We'll be having a Q&A session, which will be held using Slido, which I believe you've already been told about. But if you haven't, you need to go to the slido.com site, and you need to input this event code, which will then allow you to enter questions into the chat for the panel to pick up later. So I think that's all I need to say. So I'm now going to allow Stuart to take the presentation, and yes, so tell us all about the workplace competencies, Stuart.
Yes, so my name is Stuart Hardwick. I am a clinical scientist and training officer at University Hospitals Birmingham. So I work in the Clinical Scientific Computing group, and I support radiotherapy and imaging. As Patrick mentioned, I was a previous trainee, so I completed the STP for what was called the Clinical Bioinformatics Physical Sciences route. About 6 years ago now, I completed that, and I've been with Birmingham since then. So I'm going to try and give you an idea of what you might expect to do on a work placement component of the STP in clinical scientific computing. So I'm only going to be able to give you a brief overview, as your experiences will differ, but based on the type of department where you find yourselves. For example, I did my training as part of a clinical engineering department, and the types of opportunities that I had are going to be different to those that like we were able to provide in a radiotherapy department. But the skills you're going to learn are very much transferable across each of these departments. So as Patrick also linked, we had the Slido. So if you have some questions, please post them into here, and we'll try and go through them at the end, and we'll go through as many as we can. So as some of you may have already read, the curriculum of the scientific training program is divided into two components. The first of which is the university component, which you'll find more about in the following presentation. The second is the work-based training, which is provided by your host trust. So the work-based training component consists of a number of competencies and assessments which a candidate would be expected to complete over the course of a training scheme. These competencies can range from simple experiences such as shadowing a peer all the way up to developing a new software tool or application and having it deployed in a clinical environment. You, of course, won't be left alone to do these competencies completely on your own. You'll be guided by your training officers and your departments along the way. So it's very rare that when you enter a training scheme that you already know everything that you're expected to do on your job and on how everything works in the local group. So to get everyone up to a good level of understanding, the first year of training is broken up into introductory rotational modules. Your first rotation is likely going to be the clinical scientific computing rotation. In this rotation, you will likely be working within your home department, shadowing colleagues and peers in their day-to-day jobs. You will learn about the computer systems your department uses and how they are managed, and you will also learn how your department fits into a patient pathway. This is where you'll likely find out what your day-to-day roles are in your department, and you'll learn the basic skills required so that you can properly support your team. Not quite at a clinical scientist level, but as someone that can actually get involved and just help the clinical scientists around you So some of the jobs you may find yourself doing at this point may be just day-to-day server maintenance, or just supporting colleagues with clinical projects or any form of data analysis. As part of the clinical scientific computing STP, you'll often find yourself working alongside a lot of different groups and departments. You may even find yourself working in one of these other departments where you're offering scientific computing specialism to support a wider team. So to provide a diverse training experience, and broaden your knowledge of the other departments where you could potentially find yourself and where computing is needed, you'll also have rotational modules where you visit these departments and groups. So you will have introductory modules for health informatics, clinical engineering, and medical physics. These introductory modules will essentially allow you to spend some time working alongside clinical scientists in these fields and allow you to observe them. So I'll go a bit more detail. So in the health informatics rotation, you'll likely join a health informatics team or a business analytics team, depending on the trust. And this is where you'll see how patient data and information is collected across the wider trust. You'll also see how this data is governed and how you might use it in an audit, and how you might be able to then inform a clinical service to make improvements and such. Next up is the clinical engineering rotation. Here you will be introduced to how specialised medical technology is designed and developed in a hospital, and how it is used to provide a patient care. The technology created in these groups are often personalised or not available to buy, so it often needs to be designed and built to meet a specific purpose. So this is commonly in like rehab. People's needs are different. In this area, you'll see how medical devices are developed with patient safety in mind, and your experiences in this rotation here will be very useful in later modules, where you'll start going into software engineering using similar techniques to going through similar processes to design your softwares. And the final of the rotational modules is the medical physics rotation. This is where you'll work with medical physicists in fields such as nuclear medicine, imaging, radiotherapy, or diagnostic radiation. In these fields, it's very much modern computing has essentially become necessary and a cornerstone for their function and development. And computing is needed throughout the groups to provide for like precise planning or diagnosis. As such, you'll find a particularly large need for scientific computing knowledge and to properly support these teams. So, such as myself, I work in a medical physics department now, and yeah. So, once you enter your second year, you begin your specialism modules. So, the core elements of these specialism modules are software engineering, clinical connectivity and infrastructure, and data and security. This is where, now that you've got to grips with your departments, you can really start to get hands-on in using all the stuff you've learned previously, and you get to actually start applying it into the department. So for the software engineering, for this module, you'll learn how to design and develop clinical software, which is safe for use in a healthcare environment. This module covers the entire development lifecycle, where you learn to gather requirements for a project, transform these into a working solution, and select the most appropriate tools or languages for the purpose. So a lot of you may have had experience with many different programming languages. This is where you'll find yourself being able to directly apply this knowledge. So some examples of languages you may use are Python, Java, MATLAB, or C++. So personally, I use mostly Java and Python these days, and these are quite common within most trusts. You'll also learn appropriate testing methods to make sure that your software works as you intended it to work and as users actually need it to work. And then you'll have the chance to implement your solution into a clinical service and potentially see your work go into the patient pathway, and then you actually get to see something that you've created benefit a patient and the wider trust. So I think that's quite interesting. The next one is the the next one is the clinical connectivity and infrastructure. In the modern day, the NHS is pretty much run on computers. So getting all these computers to talk is really important in the NHS now. So I can throw out questions like, how does an MRI or CT scanner send images to a radiologist and a doctor? How does a highly detailed radiotherapy treatment plan get sent to a linear accelerator to treat a patient? Essentially, how does everything talk to each other? So these are some of the things you may learn. You will also learn how to provision and create virtual machines to host clinical applications. These could be some that you've written or third-party vendors, and how you keep these up and running and safe and secure. It's not uncommon during the training to be involved in the commission of new equipment and software, so you'll be able to get very hands-on and to get everything integrated. And then you'll actually learn how you keep these systems running every day to day, and how to keep them safe from outside threats. And finally, you have the data and security module. In this module, you'll spend some time looking at how data in the NHS is handled. Most of the data you'll see in hospital is related to patients, so we need to be really careful, and we need to make sure that it's all handled properly and used in an appropriate manner. There are, of course, legal requirements on handling patients and data. So we have like data protection laws. So we need to make sure all these are followed. So you'll learn about these. But once you know how to access this data safely and legally, is when you start to get to do some of the fun things. The NHS collects a lot of data every day. So you've probably heard terms like big data, and the NHS big data, it really does exist. So as you see all this data passing through your department every day, as scientists, you will start to think, how can I use this data to make something better? So in this module, you will have the opportunity to pick up the data, and you can start investigating it with scientific modeling. You can do machine learning, and quite commonly now is how you can apply AI to this data to make improvements. So finally, I'm just going to quickly run through the assessments that you may go through during the 3-year period. These are not quite like exams, instead they're more of a practical approach. So you have what we call OCEs, which are observed clinical events, where you watch or experience something being done in the hospital. You have DOPS, where you may be given a short task, and then you watch to do this by your assessor, or they essentially see that they see the outcome that you've done and then sign off that. You have CBDs, which are potentially just open discussions about a project or a bit of work that you've done. And then you have MSFs, which are essentially where a questionnaire is sent out to other staff you worked with, and they get to give you some advice on where you can improve. So more constructive criticism, and it's actually very beneficial to get that sort of information, and then that helps you develop. And then finally, you have what is the endpoint assessment, and this is where you have the chance to show everything you've done in the past 3 years. And this is more similar to like a Viva style discussion, where you get to present what you know and defend what you know with the assessors. So once you've got all these competences and assessments signed off, you've got your own portfolio, and this is your evidence to show that you're ready as a clinical scientist. And then essentially after that, it's just paperwork, and you become registered and able to do those, able to become a clinical scientist. So hopefully I've given you an idea of what your work placement is going to be like in a very broad sense. A bit more information provided by the previous trainees in a couple of slides time, well, a couple of presentations time, and they'll tell you more about their specific learning and what they've done in their career. So I think that's everything from me for this one.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. So yeah, if you could put your questions onto Slido, we'll take them at the end of the sort of presentation sessions. So I'm now going to hand over to Paul Ganny, who will give you a good flavour for what to expect when you do the masters, which is part of the program. So Paul, over to you.
switch my microphone on. That'll be a good start for things. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really nice to see so many people on this call whose names I recognise from when I sort of taught them many years ago. Stuart was one of the first to actually undertake this course, and it's good to see that they're still keeping you gainfully employed, Stuart. So I've got just a few points that I'd like to sort of go through with you this afternoon. I have absolutely no idea how to share my screen. Does that do the thing? Yeah, there we go. Right, I'd like to share some of my screen with you, and I'd like to share that one. Where's it gone? Right, so we're looking at scientific computing, and I'm looking at it particularly from the academic side of things. So this is the master's program, so that's why it's got a little C at the end of it rather than a capital C. So this is the Master in Science program, which runs here at Liverpool. It's a 3-year part-time course, therefore it runs alongside the workplace placements that Stuart's been talking about that you're undertaking there. What you get out of these 3 years is you've got 2 years of taught components which total 120 credits. And that's broken down in this way, that you've got 80 credits common to all the pathways. So basically you'll be sitting in with medical physics people and things like that in order to look at this. So we've got 80 credits common to all pathways dealing with things like anatomy, the introduction to medical physics, statistics, that kind of thing. And there's some basic IT stuff in there that everybody has to do. And you'll deal a lot there with sort of legislation, Data Protection Act, that kind of stuff. Then you get into the specialist stuff. And this is where you've got 40 credits worth of specialist information. And this covers topics such as databases, networking, software design, and so on. So in here, we're going into things like database design, database management. We're actually going into it in quite an academic way because in the end, this is a master's program. So whilst most of your life, you'll probably be working with databases that are a 3rd normal form, we'll actually go all the way through into 5th normal form when we're dealing with the academic stuff. So we're giving you a lot of information which you may or may not need to apply. But the important thing about this master's program really is to be underpinning everything that you do in your training centre. So we'll be looking at things, again, as I say, there's a certain amount of academic stuff in there. So we'll be looking at various different software methodologies. We'll be looking at software life cycles, safety cases, all this kind of stuff, which you may or may not come across later on. But we're giving you effectively the tools to do the job that you will need later on, whilst also providing you with a higher education qualification. Then the final year of the 3 years, you'll do a 60 credit research project provided by the training centre. When I say provided by the training centre, it's proposed by the training centre really, and in conjunction with the university, it'll be approved, and then you will undertake this throughout the majority of the 3rd year. So this, as I say, this part-time MSc is delivered alongside the practical training in the training centre. The modules are generally condensed. So unlike a lot of learning things where your workplace learning, where it might be day release, what we do here is we condense the stuff. So actually each module is normally delivered during a week each. So they're on site here in Liverpool. At the moment, I've just ducked out of a module that I'm teaching. I've got a bunch of 5 students over in another room who are currently undertaking an exercise. And they're here for this week undertaking this particular module on networking in this particular case. So that you come here for a week studying the subject, undertaking assignments and so on. Then you'll take an assignment away with you, which you will undertake back in your workplace for submission. And it depends on how the module is assessed as to what you'll get, as to whether you'll get some assignments to do or exams, and in some cases you'll get assignments and exams for various modules. Not all modules have exams, and the exams generally take place in May, but some do. Particularly things like statistics and software design, they definitely have exams. And that all takes place really in the 1st and 2nd year, these modules with your exams. And then the 3rd year, as I said, is this research project, which has you only come back to Liverpool for 1 day during this entire research project for a poster session. And it's a great day when everybody gets back together again and also present all their work that they've been doing at their research project in a massive poster session. Now, the project has 2 supervisors. There's a local one. This is from the local centre, because in the end, this project title has been created and designed by your local centre. So you need a local supervisor who understands the topic that you're doing. And then you'll have a supervisor from the university, somebody like me, who will help you through all the ways in which you need to put your material together and all this great work that you've done in order to actually complete the Masters and pass it. And really, that I think, yep. Let's get out of that and close the tray. How do I get myself back? That one there. That is pretty much everything I had to say on this topic. So I look forward to any questions you've got later on about how the Masters operates. One thing I should say, which I haven't done so far, is it is fully funded. So therefore, you're not expected to pay any tuition fees or anything like that. This is funded as part of your training program, which if that doesn't make this module attractive, nothing will. Okay, Patrick, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So just to confirm, you'll be staying for the Q&A, will you?
I will still be here, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so hopefully that was pretty clear on what the academic side will give you. So I'm now going to we're now going to have some past student perspectives.
Yep. So we've got some previous students that have been through the STP scheme, and they're going to try and give you more of an idea of what they've been through during their training. But then again, I wanted to make sure everyone has another opportunity to get the Slido information for their questions. So please get that and vote for any of the questions which if you've seen your question answered already and want it asked. So let's see if hopefully this works then. So, and someone give me a thumbs up if the same works.
Hi everyone. So my name is Helen Lasware, and I'm a computer scientist in the Department of Scientific Computing at the Royal Surrey in Guildford. And I'm just going to talk for 5 minutes or so about my background and my experiences on the NHS Scientist Training Programme. So I completed the STP in Clinical Bioinformatics Physical Sciences in September 2022. And I've since started as a computer scientist in the department where I trained. I'm sure you'll be aware the new name of the specialism is Clinical Scientific Computing, so that's what I'm talking about today. So how did I get here? I perhaps had a more convoluted route than most into the training programme. I started out doing a psychology BSc, and then after that I went on to do a biomedical engineering MSc to change fields into a more engineering type role. At this sort of time as well, I did some work experience doing some signal processing on a project looking at the induction of slow oscillations in sleep for memory consolidation. And I then worked for a couple of years as a data analyst on a project looking into precision medicine and using machine learning to predict treatment response in lupus patients. And from that, I got a place on the STP in Bioinformatics Physical Sciences. So kind of the motivation for the STP was always to find a place specifically in the NHS for the skills that I'd been learning and enjoying, for example, the programming skills, this signal processing, data analysis, that sort of thing, that I'd been learning along the way. I'd always wanted to work in the NHS, and finding out about the STP and the fact that there was this kind of more computer science type specialism was really exciting at the time. I also wanted to just pull out a few of the applicable skills that I had from my background, just to kind of show you how people with perhaps not the standard undergraduate degree might take bits of knowledge from other experiences. So, for example, from my undergrad in psychology, I got a really good grounding in statistics, which has been really useful, and also a broader understanding of the scientific method and some general scientific knowledge that's also been quite useful. But I did gain more applicable skills after my undergraduate degree. So that's when I started learning some programming. I started out in MATLAB and then also did some data analysis and machine learning, lots more maths, that kind of thing. But then also I learned a lot on the job. It's important to remember that it is a training program and that you don't have to start off with all of the skills necessary. There's plenty of opportunities to learn along the way. So as I said, my route was a little bit more convoluted, but there's a number of common routes into this specialism, such as physics, maths, engineering, computer science, and that sort of thing. So clinical scientific computing now the curriculum's changed a bit, is this field where computing skills are used to support patient care. I'm sure this will be given in other parts of the open days and presentations that you'll be hearing, but this is just kind of an overview of the curriculum. I just wanted to kind of pull out the parts that I really enjoyed. Obviously, it's a little bit different from what I did, but kind of the part of the program that and obviously there's still the project as part of the STP now. So I had a really interesting project looking at a type of small benign brain tumour called vestibular schwannomas, and looking at AI techniques to try and detect those small tumours in MRI images. And I'm currently working on getting some funding to continue that project as a computer scientist in the NHS. So apart from that, the other kind of things that I do and our department does, in the Royal Surrey, we provide scientific computing support to medical physics and the wider hospital. We undertake quite a lot of research and development, lots of research in kind of medical imaging, image collection, data sets, AI, that sort of thing. And we do a lot of bespoke software development. So lots of web development, app development, we develop databases, we collect data, we provide reporting solutions, things that might have been Excel spreadsheets at one point that are now web apps. And we do machine learning and AI. And these are some of the skills that we have in our department. So lots of different types of programming skills, skills with different types of databases, and we also have server and networking expertise because we look after a lot of our own hardware and software as well. So the projects that I'm currently working on are a big image collection project where we install some software on different hospital sites in order to collect medical images for AI projects. There are a couple of things that I'm involved with that. One is trying to speed up part of the image collection process, and another is to collect some of the metadata from those images and store it separately. And I'm also about to start working on our website for scientific computing as well. So in terms of at this stage, when you're thinking of applying to the STP, I had a bit of a think about what advice that I might give, and what advice was given to me at a similar point. So one of the really important things I found was to talk to current or ex-STPs, and I always found plenty of people really happy to offer advice, to read over applications. So get in touch via, there's lots of people who are contactable via Twitter. My email address is on the first slide of this presentation if you'd like to talk to me. That's absolutely fine. Also, I think it's quite important to talk to the different work-based departments that I've given you an overview of what we do here at the Royal Surrey, but lots of places do different things. And so kind of getting an idea of what individual departments do is really important. In terms of the application and interview itself, one of the big things, know the NHS values. Just make sure that you've read them and that you can have applicable scenarios and that sort of thing to cover those values. Also look at current news and research or important guidance in your specialism. So for example, for this specialism, the Topple review is quite a good place to start, but kind of being on top of current affairs and things going on in your specialism is a good idea. And we've got a blog that's run by current STP trainees on stpperspectives.com. So that's always a good place to look for advice. There's lots of interview and application advice there, and lots of people talking about their specialisms and what they do. And that's about it from me. Thank you very much.
The next talk we have is from Elise. This one is a little bit quieter, so you may need to turn up your sound a little bit.
Hi, I'm Elise Leahy, and I finished the STP earlier this year, so finished in 2022. I did the STP in clinical bioinformatics, physical sciences, and completed my training at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals. So, you know, before I ended up going to the STP, I actually did my bachelor's in maths, and then I went on to a master's in mathematical medicine and biology. You know, what kind of drew me to the STP was that I could use kind of the things that I learned during my master's in my day-to-day job, as I really enjoyed the application of maths and kind of coding into medicine. And I always wanted to work for the NHS because I think it's just such a good organisation where you feel like you can help people. You know, what particularly drew me to this specialism was that during my master's, I really enjoyed the coding side of it. Obviously, I had lots of maths given it was a mathematical master's, but part of that was simulations and modelling of the mathematical models. So that was what kind of drew me to this, because I'd be able to do a lot of coding, software development with that aspect to biology and health. So in terms of the kind of what I did during the STP, my role was primarily based around projects. So I completed several different projects, including image processing, kind of application development, and website development, as well as doing some statistical analysis, database design and management, as well as kind of learning more of the IT and management side, including server maintenance and networking. You know, it gave me a real breadth of knowledge over computer science and how that is kind of used within the NHS and what is the potential for that use in the NHS. I think that was an interesting aspect of it. And, you know, one of the image processing. So essentially it took medical images and then created algorithm or software to process those images as needed. One example is that I was on a project to anonymise ultrasound images so that they could be used by researchers at Sheffield University. You know, kind of after I finished the STP, I've finished it now. We're currently getting registered at the moment, put in my application, and I've moved to University College London Hospital's Scientific Computing Department. It's something that I've really enjoyed so far. I've only been here a month, so still getting used to it. But I've been able to jump on a lot of projects, and there's kind of so much support and drive for kind of clinical scientists in scientific computing, as we're quite a small specialism, given that it's relatively new compared to something like medical physics. So there is a real drive for kind of innovation and support of clinical scientists in scientific computing. So in terms of advice I would give to you applying, I'd say make sure you read all of the information on the National School of Healthcare Science website. You know, they have so much information on there about what you need to know, the process and everything. So make sure you read all that information. I'd say as well, have a look at the curriculum for the clinical scientific computing specialism, because you'll be able to really see from there what you'll be doing, what is the different projects, and what's kind of the aim of the knowledge for you to have at the end of the course. You know, so you can kind of see where you'll be working, what your specialist knowledge would be. I'd say as well, you know, don't be worried about contacting scientific computing departments. From my experience, anytime we've had a student in, everybody's very eager to kind of tell them what work we're doing and to encourage them to get into the field. So definitely get in contact with the scientific computing department near you. It's really something that we will support and definitely encourage perhaps even a visit or an extended period of time. But yeah, thank you, and I hope you found this helpful.
Finally, we have Naomi to talk about her experience.
Hello, my name is Naomi, and I'm going to talk through some of my STP experience. So I did the STP in clinical bioinformatics, physical sciences. I started that in 2017 and I finished it in autumn 2020. So I've now been working as a clinical scientist for just over 2 years. So before doing the STP, I did a physics degree at the University of Birmingham. I then went on to do an interdisciplinary PhD, also at the University of Birmingham, in the physical sciences of imaging in the biomedical sciences. So it combined chemistry, physics, computer science, bioscience, all into one big degree. So my actual PhD was in super resolution imaging with metamaterials. So after doing the PhD and completing it, although I enjoyed doing academic science, I still wanted to work as a scientist, but I decided to go into clinical science because I wanted to have a direct impact on people. And also I wanted to be able to keep working in a very interdisciplinary environment. And I really like the idea of being in a much more medical environment rather than sat in a tiny room somewhere at the back end of university. So that was the kind of like, what I wanted from a job in terms of the actual work itself, but also from a work-life perspective. I wanted the kind of scientific bit of being in academia, but I didn't want the potentially having to move to a different country every 1 to 2 years. And so for me, clinical science was a nice balance of still doing science, actually having it impact directly on people, but also having a better work-life balance of what I want. So yeah, I finished my STP a few years ago, but the part I found the most interesting across the 3 years, I think, was learning about radiotherapy and oncology, because there's something I didn't have any experience of really previously to doing my STP. And one of the things I enjoyed most was actually getting to do some deep learning, so AI stuff, using actual anonymized clinical data, and doing that on a sort of clinically relevant project. So that was the bit I enjoyed the most. So when I finished my STP in 2020, so I'd been trained here at University Hospitals Birmingham, as you can see from my background, and I was working in medical physics, the medical physics department, but mostly in radiotherapy. And I'm now working in that same department, so I transitioned with only a small gap between doing completing my training and then going on to work in the same department. And so I'm in the same department, same field, doing essentially the same sort of job I was doing towards the end of my training, but doing more stuff because I know more stuff now. I think without the STP, I don't think I'd have all the skills I really need for my current role. Although if you went, you could train in a different way potentially to get those skills. But I think part of the STP that was really beneficial was I got to train across different departments, both within UHB, University Hospitals Birmingham, but also I went across to places like the Women's Hospital. And I think I'd have lost out. And I also saw people from hospitals across England and Wales in lots of different clinical science disciplines. And I think I'd have lost out on quite a lot of knowledge and experience of useful for me in my job role, but just also in general about like the NHS and clinical science in the NHS, which I think training in a different way, I wouldn't have got that same experience. So I'm really grateful for that. So in terms of my day-to-day role now, as a clinical scientist, I am a clinical computer scientist is my official job title. As I've already said, I am still based here at University Hospitals Birmingham in medical physics, primarily in the radiotherapy physics department. So my day-to-day role involves managing specialized clinical software. So I look after a system called RayStation, which is treatment planning software, which is what physics staff and clinicians use to plan radiotherapy treatments for patients, and that can involve resolving issues if someone says something go wrong, doing some of the more slightly boring sides, like just doing OS updates, but also responding to security alerts and dealing with those. We do some software development. I'm in the process of starting writing some scripts for use in the department. There's lots of data analysis and lots of data archiving. We commission clinical software and also hardware. I'm currently waiting for 4 servers to arrive. And also there is an element of just kind of general IT type tasks, so user management. So there is an element of resetting passwords and like helping people set up their computers, although a lot of that is dealt with by the actual IT team here at UHB, but we get involved in some of it, especially if it's something directly related to a very clinical bit of software as opposed to a more general bit of software like Word or PowerPoint. And I think if I was to give any advice to someone who's thinking about applying to Clinical Scientific Computing STP, which is what my STP developed into, I mean, I think one key thing is, from my experience, you don't need to have done a computer science degree to apply. Like my background is primarily in physics, and you can succeed in it. You do need some experience of programming and computing, but you do not have to have done a full-blown 3 or 4 years in computer science to be able to do the job and do the job well. Because no matter what your background is, both academically and also in general, like you're going to be learning lots of new things, even if you have done a computer science degree, and you're going to gain a lot of new skills. So everyone will be learning something no matter what. And you will be trained in all the different bits, because each hospital does everything slightly differently, and departments in the same hospital do things differently. And should you get on the STP, which I hope you do, I think key things are think proactively, because there's quite a lot of stuff to do across the 3 years. So try and work out when you'll be able to do it all. And also try and plan your time well. Again, for the same reason of there's a lot to do, a lot to cover. And so planning your time well will make it easier, as I know from bitter experience sometimes. So yeah. Thanks for listening, and bye.
So I believe that's all of our talk. So I think we got some quite a few questions in the things that I'll hand over to Katie to go through those, and we'll try answer the best we can.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, we've had quite a few questions come in through Slido, so we'll get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes. So I'll just read out the question, and then all the presenters can sort of decide between you who wants to answer it. So our most popular question is, what educational backgrounds are generally successful in applications? Is a purely medical or biological background a hindrance versus a computer science, medical physics background?
So I think I'll probably take that to start off with, as the obviously the professional lead for the curriculum review. I would say that for the new curriculum, the computing content has been increased. It doesn't mean that you have to be a computer scientist, but it does mean that you will be expected to do programming. You will be expected to be involved with databases, as they apply to medical systems used for patients. So I wouldn't say that anybody with a medical biological background would be excluded, but if you don't want to do programming, this is probably not the scheme for you.
Thanks, Patrick. The next question is, can someone who graduated over 10 years ago in computer science apply, or do they need to be a recent graduate?
Yeah, I don't want to keep hogging this, but I did look at some in advance, and just to say that no, it's not for recent graduates. We've had people who have gone many years after graduation, gone through PhDs, and then come into computer science, and then come into this subject. So no, they don't need to be a recent graduate.
What do you think would make my application stand out in scientific computing?
I'll let someone else have a go at this one.
Stuart, do you fancy this one?
I think one of the things that you used is knowing what the NHS is and what does it mean to be a clinical scientist. Essentially, is you want to know what the like concepts like the NHS Constitution. Why does the NHS exist? And essentially, your focus should be on you want to help. You've got patients at the end of the line. You want to help them, and you want to make sure everything you've created is safe for them. And as a clinical scientist in clinical computing, you're essentially at the front of that. You are making software, and you need to make sure it's safe. There's a lot of computer developers around the world. Many of them have no clinical experience. They're just making software, and you have the experience of what it means to a patient, and what it means to affect the patient, and how it helps the NHS. So knowing the NHS, the Constitution, and really having an understanding of what it is you're going into. I think that's all we said. There's probably better responses from others for that one.
I mean, it's really knowing, how IT applies to, well, in the patient environment is obviously key, because if you can put that across, that you appreciate that need, then that would stand out to me.
Any other of our STP alumni panelists want to chip in, or should we go to the next question? Okay, brilliant. Next question, Paul. I've got a couple about the academic side, so I'll hand these to you. So David asks, just to clarify, that there would be 6 weeks each academic year in Liverpool, and is there an option for remote learning?
Okay, well, firstly, it's not 2 weeks per term, because generally the summer term you're not up here apart from to sit exams. Stuart can probably comment better on that, because or many of the others who've done it more recently, because I only mostly know the stuff that I teach. But yeah, it's about 6 to 7 weeks here in Liverpool, spread over mostly over 2 terms, and that's in year 1 and year 2. In year 3, you're only up here very little, probably only for the poster day. The options of remote learning, we haven't really looked that much into it, apart from during COVID, of course, everything had to be remote learning. So some of the stuff can be delivered that way, but some of it is very difficult to do. Some of the group work, and particularly if you need any equipment, that's very difficult to do remotely. But some of the courses could be done remotely if required. And we've certainly had that when some people have sort of signed in ill or anything like that. Jack's just stuck his hand up, so I'll hand over to him.
All I wanted to add to that was that in terms of remote learning, don't worry about funding. If your trust is in, I don't know, Liverpool, London, and you're going to Liverpool, there's generally a training budget associated with which can cover your accommodation fees, accommodation when you get to Liverpool. So you're not having to spend, say, a week in Liverpool off your own back. You are getting accommodation included.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. I forgot to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Paul, again for you. When do the exams for the academic component take place?
They're generally in May. Again, one of the more recent trainees might be able to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but certainly the exam papers that I set, they all take place in May. The master's project, when you do that, the final handing for that is sometime over the summer, but the exams from the modules are in May.
Thank you. The next question we've got is, a lot of STP graduates seem to already have postgraduate degrees before applying to the programme. Is it realistic to apply with only a BSc?
So there is
Hello, I'm Isadora. I just finished the STP and I only had a BSc before I got on, and my BSc was in computer science, and I did do other things to boost my application, but I did get on with just a BSc.
Yeah, but you need a 2-1 or a first. That's the main criteria, or if you have a 2-2, you could boost that with an MSc. It's that kind of trade-off and combination, really. But if you just got a BSc or a BEng or whatever, that would be a 2-1 or a first. You would need to be at.
Thank you. Next question we've got is, once you have completed the STP and passed the assessment, becoming a registered clinical scientist, are you automatically employed at that hospital?
No. Very simply, no.
I can answer that one a little bit. So when the departments apply for STP posts, they're anticipating a need for someone in those posts in the future. You can't always guarantee that they'll line up, and quite a lot of time it doesn't. But again, a lot of time it does. So it's very much how you stand out and how the work and how much the workload actually increases during those times. So Birmingham have been relatively quite good in bringing people through. As you heard Naomi talking previously, when she finished, she essentially moved directly onto the scheme. So it is common. For myself, I did my training in Liverpool, and there wasn't there, so I moved down to Birmingham myself. And there is a lot of moving, but there is also, it is not rare for people to go straight on to some sort of employment.
Yeah, but
afterwards.
it's not guaranteed in the scheme. Although I would say there is an increasing need for these type of skills in the NHS. So even though you may not get employed in the department you trained in, I am pretty sure there will be other departments who want these skills, who may not be able to train you, but would be very happy to take you on as a qualified person.
Yeah, just to add to that from my experience, so I trained in Sheffield, but unfortunately they didn't have the funding there to keep me on, and I was able to find another role at UCLH because there's so few people qualified in this subject. You'll find generally if you apply for roles at other trusts, you will be kind of the top people there because a lot of the other people will be applying and they won't have the same training that you have.
Thanks everyone for all those different inputs. That's really valuable. Got time for a couple more questions. So what level of software engineering or computer science principles are presumed as a prerequisite prior to the MSc content?
If I can take that one, I would say certainly from my side on the academic side, I wouldn't expect a huge amount of computer science background as being needed. I think you've got to have a general understanding of what computing is. But I would think that if you've never written a program before, you're probably going to struggle. Because whilst we will teach a lot of stuff from the ground up, I'll teach databases from the ground up, I'll teach a lot of networking from the ground up and web design and so forth. We don't teach programming from the ground up. So if you've never done any programming before, you're probably going to struggle. That's probably about the only thing. Don't know about other people who've done the course recently. You might say, no, I didn't know this, I struggled. But
so from my experience, I came in from a maths degree and I'd only really used MATLAB and a little bit of Python, but that was just in terms of modelling. And where I did my training, they were very supportive in terms of helping me to learn different coding techniques, particularly with object-orientated coding. So I did several kind of exercises within the first couple of months just to get that kind of skill up to where it needed to be. So for example, I created a calculator for a Windows app as like an exercise to start with. So it will depend on when you're based, but I found I was able to learn a lot of it on the job.
Yeah, I can add to that a little bit. As every trainee that comes into it has different strengths and weaknesses, and they're always going to be, the training you're going to get is not going to be, I'm not going to give the same trainee to a computer scientist that I would give to someone that's done a physics degree, because their strengths are different. I can focus very strongly on like teaching programming to someone that hasn't done programming, but they may have strengths in understanding theoretical physics, and you can shift how you want, and you essentially getting everyone to the same sort of level anyway. So some people need more help in one area, and then some people need help in another area. So And I think credit to Paul. I think that a lot of the software development stuff that he taught was done very well, and it's done at the right time in your training.
Cool. Well, that sort of brings us to the end of our webinar. So I'll just hand over to Patrick to sort of wrap up the session.
I don't think I've really got a lot to say. So other than Katie, would it be possible for us to get these questions and maybe give some written answers to them that we could post on the school site?
Yeah,
I think there are some. I don't think we've
we'll...
covered them all, and I think there's probably some important questions there that would be good to give people the answers to.
Yeah, not a problem. We can do that.
Yeah. Other than that, I would say yes, it's now time to apply. So please get your applications into the Clinical Scientific Computing STP, and hopefully we'll see some of you on interviews, and Paul will see some of you on the academic content, which will start in September. And good luck. And thank you everybody who presented today.
Well, thank you for putting it together.
Well, it wasn't but me, it was mostly Stuart and Katie, so thank them.
Well, thanks to Stuart and Katie then.
Okay, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.